Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent. Richard, you're spending a lot of your time overseas. You know what they folks say about they're amazed, obviously, by the American political process. What are you hearing tonight? What are you reading?
Well, let's just cut to the chase. Assuming, and that's what we're talking about, that he does win, people I'm speaking to think it's absolutely catastrophic. That it's catastrophic for the United States, that it's catastrophic for our position in the world. It emboldens our enemies and adversaries. It makes our allies terrified that we're not going to be their allies anymore. Most people think that this type of scenario happens. That if you imagine the United States as a nuclear warship, we stop. We become totally focused on our own domestic politics, that he's going to provoke a constitutional crisis, he's going to get into a fight with the Supreme Court, there'll be attempts to impeach him, and that for 6 months to a year or longer, we will be navel-gazing, we will not be leading the world, and other powers, Russia, China, adjust around us.
He has called our general stupid. He has advocated.
Let me tell you, tonight the general is reading the Constitution.
I'm sorry, say it again?
General, I've been talking to generals for a long time. They've been reading the Constitution to see what they are obligated to do. If they are really ordered to round up and deport millions of Americans and put them on buses or trains, do they have to do that? The president is the commander-in-chief. That's the stage what we're talking about. It's, do they have to follow what they would believe would be an immoral and illegal order? So you have to look at this as a transformative event, with America's role, not just domestically, but internationally.
Let me throw this at you. The national intelligence, the White House, everyone has agreed that the Russians have taken an active role in this election. Because it's a political thing, it sometimes gets overlooked, But that's if you take this election out of the equation and Russians interfering with any American process, it's a frightening picture.
Well, if you look at the world, right? We used to live in a world with two great superpowers, and with the collapse of the Soviet Union, we're now left with the United States being the only remaining superpower. Well, that has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantages, and also its disadvantage, that no other state can do as much harm to you as you can do to yourself, right? And it seems to be that that is what the United States is doing right now. And Russia, as the last superpower, decided that a way to regain its empire, to regain its position in the world, was to help undermine the political system. And I've been to Russia, I've spoken to hackers there, we've spoken to intelligence communities. They had no doubt that Russia was deeply involved in helping to undermine Hillary Clinton. They also expect that Russia has been stockpiling information on Trump. Clearly, Trump has done a lot of business there. He's an easier target. We know, and we've talked about all the scandals. So wouldn't it make sense that if Russia now would want to unleash all of the material that has been...
We don't know that to be the
That's
case.
speculative, but not based on my speculation. That's based on speculation of people who've been examining this, including cyber experts who have been investigating Russia's role, that they have material on Trump, that it would behoove them to unleash it in order to hobble him, in order to hobble us, in order to hobble the only remaining
All
superpower.
Russia cares about is us staying out of their way.
Imagine us.
This is what they want.
We're a nuclear ship. We stop. Steam comes out of the middle. Russia, China, they do what they want. Russia, speaking of ships, has just moved its ship off the coast of Syria and is expected to start pounding Aleppo tomorrow, eastern Aleppo. Do you think we're going to be talking about that?
Do we know what his plan? He's talked about a plan in Syria.
I'm sorry. Because the Chinese have got military stuff going on as well, Lester. They're moving out of China across the South China Seas and into the Middle East. I mean, they've got a whole pathway going there at that point.
If we make ourselves irrelevant, others will step into the gap.
Yeah. What are they saying in Turkey, and what are they saying in Israel, and what are they saying in the Middle East about what happens in that cauldron of the world right now?
Well, can I tell you something? I wasn't surprised by this outcome. I actually thought this was going to happen because it fits a trend. And you're seeing this trend in Turkey, in the Philippines, in Egypt, with Brexit, where you're having, even in Iceland, where you're having right-wing or fringe candidates emerging to the forefront. It's been a pattern. And where you have these populist leaders who are effectively doing what they want, appealing directly to the people, of going through social media, going through the television. And okay, if this happens in the Philippines, it's bad for that country. If it happens to the United States, it's terrible for everybody. So that's what they're seeing. They're seeing it as this part of this larger pattern of fringe candidates and right wing.
This is upbeat.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't mean to be like, I'm sitting here. I mean, you're painting a frightening picture, Richard, and
I wish I wasn't. I was
want to
driving
go back to what Savannah said, which is the weight of the office. Will he understand the responsibility he has as?
I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't
as
think
Europe's safety net. I mean, Europe right now has got to be freaking out.
Well, clearly,
Yeah.
I mean, he has spoken in very negative terms about our obligations to NATO. And one thing in seeing Republicans reelected to the Senate, like John McCain, who are strong voices around the world I mean, some of his closest friends are the leaders of countries that rely on a clear voice from the United States of America. I mean, he will have a check in some of those senators and in some
Isn't
of the.
that ironic?
Yeah.
Because there was so much talk about, Hillary Clinton will win.
Right.
We need Republicans
Well,
in the Senate to be a check. It may fall to a John McCain,
On foreign
Lindsey
policy,
Graham, on a lot of these.
On foreign policy, Hillary Clinton was much more in line with a foreign policy view of the Republican establishment. She understood and valued our commitments around the world. She understood and valued the importance of.
All right.
But
What
she,
Republican establishment?
well,
It
I
just
mean, there
got
are
upended.
well, the
I mean, what is this?
Republicans still control the Senate.
Well, I hear you, except Donald Trump, the country has spoken. And the Republican primary voters spoken. They rejected the Republican establishment, and now they rejected the Washington establishment as a whole, the American political establishment throwing us in the media. So I hear you, but what kind of check? I go back to Donald Trump won this on his own
Completely.
to the point where one newspaper in this country endorsed him.
The National Enquirer.
One. Well, all right. I was counting Las Vegas Review-Journal,
Oh,
Sheldon Adelson
two.
paper.
Well, I think you're going to
So
hear more voices coming out and saying he didn't win it on its own, and I think that there's going to be more voices emerging.
You're saying Russia?
I'm saying there are going to be a lot of attention
Assange?
focused on Russia, on Assange, and we're going to be tying ourselves in knots. We're going to be fighting over the Constitution. We're going to be fighting over the Supreme Court. Was Russia involved? And then proving that it was involved through hacking is a very complicated task. So I just see us not sitting back and saying, okay, well, the American people have spoken. We're just going to hope for the best, and maybe that once he walks into the Oval Office, he'll have some epiphany that he needs to be responsible.
Could he undo the Iran deal?
Yeah, of course he could.
But the fact is, Richard, the first half of your statement is the correct one. He has power because the American people gave it to him. And he didn't go to them with one set of values and then change to another. He stayed true to who he was, however much anyone may disagree with any of that. They bought into that. That's what they wanted. They thought that that's what Washington needed to see. They also thought it's what the world needed to see.
Well, they keep seeing that when the market crashes and when other things happen. There was the Brexit regret that happened.
Oh, I
afterwards.
understand that. I get that. But I'm telling you, that's the reality of where we are. That's the system that we have. People get to make a choice about who their leaders are. Then the leaders have to decide what kind of leaders they want to be. And it doesn't come from outside. It really comes from inside who they are and the kind of value that are imparted to those leaders by the people who put them in that office. Look, I've got grave reservations. You and I have talked about this a lot, about what kind of an international leader he'll be, about how much he understands how complex all of this is, because he's a guy who, went through the primaries shooting from the hip, worked for him very well politically. We've seen other people go into that office and be overwhelmed by it, quite honestly, because from the moment you step in, the problems come through the transom, under the door, through the windows, 24/7. And you've got to have great staffs, and you have to have a very sophisticated system for dealing with all that. Is he up to that? Does he care about it? I don't know. But in the meantime, he does have the power of the people behind him.
Let's get the read over at the